Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Scythe. I read adult fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion fic from Archive of Our Own called The Rescue Party by Aeolian Sands. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. On with the show. The Rescue Party by Aeolian Sands. Chapter 41. On the Plains of Anfauglith.
You should sneak up on Mother, Aradhel whispered to Argon as the two of them left the gladiator pit and walked into an open cavern where the others were getting organized. No one saw them enter.
Amela is here?
Argon asked. She is. And Erwin and Arafin were too. Fëanor was here, but then...
Uncle Fëanor is a legend.
If by a legend you mean mad and insane, then yes. Hurry! Everyone get in a group here. Arafin can help sing disguises, a female voice ordered. Both children of Fingolfin looked up to see their mother gently guide emaciated elves towards the king who stood in the far corner with his back against the rock wall.
Finarfin began.
Erwin put a reassuring hand on his arm. You can do it, love, she said.
Finarfin grumbled something inaudible, and then sang a few words of power. The thralls were turned from elves to extremely thin orcs that would not have fooled an actual orc for half a second.
I don't know, Anara began.
Finarfin shot her a glance and promptly sang a few words more, making Anara look orcish as well, but with all the wrong proportions.
Amile!
Argon called then, making his presence known and approaching his mother with arms wide open.
You are as beautiful as I remembered.
Anara stopped looking at her now gnarled hand and stared at her son and his shit-eating grin. Then she smacked him upside the head.
Ow,
he replied. Anara shook her head.
If I didn't miss you so much, I would send you back to Mondos myself for that comment.
Then she turned and flung herself at her son. He caught her in a fierce hug. Aradhel tapped her foot.
You know, I don't remember my hug. You got one after the fight with Moringotto.
Aradhel raised an elegant eyebrow.
Is that so? Well, maybe I want another one.
Anara rolled her eyes, but hugged her daughter anyway. Feeling eyes on her, Aradhel looked over her mother's shoulder to see one of the former slaves smiling at them. Oh, forgive me. It's just, long have I dreamed of hugging my daughter too, he said in Sindarin, averting his eyes.
You will,
Rog declared as he appeared, leading another group of slaves out from a side tunnel.
Your Majesty, if you please.
He gestured at the ragged elves behind him. Finarfin looked none too happy, but he attempted to give the new group disguises as well. Little one clicked her tongue.
If it isn't Rog the demon. I was beginning to think you were fictional.
Rog bowed. I am flesh and bone, my lady. I like the outfit and the dagger. I don't recall us having met.
I am Fëanor's sister.
It's Quivier! Someone from Rog's group shouted. Rog looked at her incredulously. That already explains so much. Lalwyn winked.
Quivier, did the last group reach the south? My brother was in it.
They did. And now it's our turn to get out of here. Gather up the last of your strength. Once everyone is ready, I can lead you out of the mines. Glorfindel, Acthelion, and I can handle the back, Rog said, hoisting a gladiator's crude hammer onto his back. The rest of you should take the front.
If we run across my husband, he's mine to deal with, Nerdanel declared.
Aradhel snickered. She had always liked Aunt Nerdanel. She was a strong woman who knew how to keep order. Most of the time. She was, after all, usually outnumbered. Finarfin sang a few more words of power, and soon the rather poorly disguised caravan was ready to make its final escape. This was by far the largest group Lalwyn had ever led out of Angband.
But the fortress was mostly empty now. Behind her were elves that shouldn't even be capable of walking. And yet they had labored every day in the mines, forges, arenas, and pits of Angband. Lolwen had faith they could find the strength to last just a little while longer. As she brought them to the main tunnel beneath the fortress, to one that took more easterly route, she wondered if they should have searched for any special prisoners. They were always the most miserable and tortured of them all. Maedhros had been marked one of these. She turned and asked one of the freed elves. "No," he replied. "Morgoth has not got anyone of that importance recently, far I know." Lolwen thanked him and breathed a sigh of relief. Worst case scenario, with Morgoth defeated, they could return with an army and free anyone accidentally left behind. Because if one thing was sure, she was not leaving a single soul imprisoned in this hell. She glanced at the walls cut by dull picks until she eventually found the mark in the black rock. To anyone else it was but a scrape, but to Lolwen it was her sign to look for a small cavern to her left. And there it was. "Everyone through here," she gestured. "Not too many turns left, and then we shall see the sun again." Ossa flew to the ruins of Gondolin with a smirk on his face. It had been a long while since he had last been allowed to summon a true form. Truth to be told, Ossa wasn't so confident that Lord Ulmo was permitting it now. But the continent was already lost. Why not add a little water and wind into the earth and fire? It almost seemed like a destiny. Plus, there were no elves around to be caught in the crossfire this time. His mind made up, Ossa landed on one of Ekoriath's tall peaks and watched, intrigued, as the orcs fought each other over the treasures of the Noldor. There was even a particularly fat one trying to make a run for it through the fields, loops of pearls around its thick neck. The Maya of the scene noted with a smirk that those pearl strands were not even of high quality. They would not have passed the Uinen inspection. Aside from the fleeing fat orc, there came the sounds of riotous screams from within the burning city. Well then, time for some cleansing rain. Ossa transformed his humble fauna into one of great stature, golden scales gleaming and electricity radiating from sapphire eyes. He leapt into the sky, one arm raised as dark clouds began to coalesce around his fist. The earth shattered beneath his feet when he landed in the valley, a hurricane now churning above his head like a halo. Rain started pelting the city and the valley, steam hissing as fires were extinguished. Orcs screamed in terror when they glanced up to see the swirling clouds. Ossa's eyes glistened with electric fire as he rained bolts down from on high. Guthmok wrenched his head up from where he stood by the fallen ruins of the king's tower. "Osse!" He growled, but his voice was feeble with fear as the rain turned to sheets and threatened to extinguish the Balrog's flame. In desperation, Morgoth's captain began to charge at the Maya, a war cry escaping his black lips. But the thunder in the sky seemed to laugh in response. The fierce winds buffeted the demon back, and then a blue bolt shot him straight through his chest. He fell backward into the stone of Ecthelion's fountain before disappearing into the waters. The thunder laughed still as the black clouds covered the valley and plunged it into night. Manwë stood on Taniquetil, looking at the churning hurricane above the former city of Gondolin in dismay. "How is that subtle?" Tulkas declared in a booming voice. "Was not that your reason? Ulmo can interfere because he has a certain subtlety." "Tulkas," Manwë growled in warning. "He has a point," Aula said. "Melkor is destroying Beleriand." "Melkor has fallen. The light of the Silmaril has destroyed him," Manwë answered. Nienna sniffled. "Well, I mourn for what your brother once was. He has been fallen for several millennia. What about the children?" "And the animals," Yavanna mentioned. "And the dwarves. Do you want them to be crushed?" Aula replied. "Or worse, drowned when Ossa gets carried away, as he always does." "How about crushed and drowned?" Would that satisfy you? Manuel looked to his wife. The others were right, of course. He did not want every living thing in Beleriand to perish. But he wasn't sure if unleashing his fellow lords and ladies while they were so angry was a good idea. Varda got the message. He inclined her chin at him, and Manuel slumped a little bit in his throne in relief. Order! Now, I know it may not look like it, but everything is going remarkably well on Arda, the Queen of Stars began.
Remarkably well!
A furious Namo stormed into the circular room, the great doors slamming into marble walls.
That persistent pest just tried to live in my home again!
I seriously doubt it, Yavanna answered.
Manwe, you may be my king, but my halls are my halls! If all the elves, men, dwarfs, ants, turtles, and porcupines of Beleriand perish, I will not be hosting their houseless spirits. I have paid my dues.
Varda gave the slightest flinch at his outburst. Honey, Vaida said, reaching out to touch her husband's arm. She whispered something to Namo to calm him down, though Manwe could not hear what she said. Lord Namo, we will not let all of Beleriand perish, Varda said.
I propose we build an island,
Aula interjected. Everyone stared at the smith.
What? Ulma did it once before with Tall Eresea. We just raise a new island and use it to transport everyone to safety, he explained.
What of the men? Irmo asked.
I can lead an expedition, Orma said. I can take the men and mortal races to the east, where the land is yet untouched by evil.
Orma leading an expedition, just what we need, Irmo grumbled.
Manwe cleared his throat. Very well. We shall raise an island for the elves to return to Valinor.
And the ban? Asked Yavanna.
The ban of the Valar will be lifted. Feanor, who led them into darkness, also let them out of it. By breaking Silmaril, he willingly sacrificed himself for the sake of his people. As for the rest of the Noldor, they have not wavered once in their dedication to that which is holy and good in this world. They have run fearlessly into battle against black armies and unnatural creatures of darkness, their only hope being that their friends will be there beside them. Now that I have seen this, it is time that we, the Ainur of Ea, stand beside them and trust that they will not repeat the sins of the past. Let's go raise an island, Aula declared, throwing a fist into the air and smirking at his wife. Yavanna rolled her eyes but followed him out the door with most of the others, Orme talking excitedly about his expedition east. Yaraquinga and his cavalry charge from eastern Beleriand was an unstoppable force as they moved across the plains. Those that dwelt within the shadows of Himring did so because they, above all the rest of the Noldor, lusted for revenge on Morgoth. Theirs was supposed to be the front line. They were to be the first in battle and last in retreat. Their walls were made to bear the brunt of the assault, and Morgoth feared them the most. So when the news spread that the war was being won in the west, and they were being left out of this moment of glory, no prayer could keep the warriors of the Sons of Feanor and their allies from their furious charge. The first vanguard of fleeing, panicked orcs that fell under their hooves fell so quickly that the conflict could have been compared to a great wave drowning an anthill. Where are they? The bearded dwarf lord Azaghal shouted from his heavily armored battle pony. Where are the forces of Angamando? I shall give the great lizards and fire demons a taste of their own medicine. Yaraquinga twisted in his saddle. Scattered, he answered. I think the war has missed us this time. No war cowers from the face of Azaghal, he shouted. Then the Lord of Belegost and his host were charging again. This caused Yaraquinga's people to shout and gallop forward as well. Yaraquinga was definitely getting too old for this. The trouble really began when one of the captains spied the fiery hides of two Balrogs in the distance. A fire demon yet draws breath, the elf declared. The resulting rampage as the dwarves and elves sprinted for the two of the most dangerous entities in Arda, like children racing for candy,
should have countered all reason. Yet these were the warriors of the East. When the horned demons saw the bloodthirsty hordes racing for them, they turned and ran back towards the Black Fortress. Yaraquinka knew that they would not be fast enough. The ensuing battle was furious and short. Scathing whip marks slashed many, but when one elf fell, 2 others pulled him up and made sure he still had a sword. The swarms restrained the movements of the demons, and when one tripped and fell, it was over nearly as quickly as it had begun. Then Yaraquinka watched 4 dwarfs and 2 of his captains throw the fallen Balrog's massive whip at the one still standing, ensnaring its legs and bringing it down to a quick death. "Now that's more like it!" Azakal shouted. "Who else?" And the force was riding again, cutting down any enemy that still drew breath in the inhospitable plains of the north. They were halfway to Angband itself when suddenly Yaraquinka spied a small army flanking them and approaching from the south. "Behind us!" someone called. The old advisor's sixth sense started tingling. "Hold it! Hold!" he shouted as loud as he could manage, blowing his horn. For a split moment, the army stilled. Yaraquinka strained his eyes. Yes, he knew it. Fëanor lived. The Eagle of Anwe had not mentioned this fact, only telling him to prepare for war, but Yaraquinka was there when the Spirit of Fire was born. He helped raise him, and he had attempted to advise him for the 3 seconds that he had been king. He knew Fëanor well enough to know that he would not miss the end of Morgoth, come death, hell, or high water. "Hail! A spirit that heeds counsel not!" Yara shouted as soon as Fëanor was within hearing range. The son of Finwë rode on a grey stallion next to Amras. "An old man! Isn't it a little early for you to be out of bed?" Fëanor yelled back. It was almost comical how the army is silenced on hearing the voice of their former king. A voice that sounded different from when Yaraquinka had last heard it all those years ago on a very different battlefield. It was lighter now, and there was joy in it. "I've been cleaning up what I presume is your mess," he declared. "How ever did you convince Namo to release you?" Fëanor grasped Yaraquinka's forearm in greeting and stopped his horse alongside the advisor's own. "The first time I just left the halls, and the second time, Lord Namo insisted." "I can't imagine why," Yaraquinka muttered. "The king!" an elf yelled from the ranks. "The king returns!" "Ah!" Fëanor winked to the advisor. "Let me take care of this." Yaraquinka almost considered stopping him, but there was something about the sparkle in Fëanor's eyes. He stood there with a shell-shocked Amras. "I don't know," Amras began. "I don't know anything anymore." "Noldor!" Fëanor called in a great voice. The crowds silenced and formed tighter ranks. "Your undying loyalty to justice is recognized and commended. You have stood against the powers of the endless darkness for restless centuries. Not once have you wavered in the defense of your homes and families. You are a noble people, a heroic people. And for that," Fëanor paused, his voice dipping just a bit. "For that, I can never be your king. I led you astray in my anger and in my rage. And now I have learned that Silmarils and thrones are insignificant compared to trust of one's people. Once I betrayed that trust to pursue those worthless things. There are consequences to one's actions, and I am not one to cower from them. To each of you, you have my deepest and sincerest apologies, but I shall never again be your king. Rightfully, I should still be in Mandos now. Yet if your hearts can hold the smallest spark of undeserved forgiveness, allow me to ride with you one last time. Let's finish cleansing Arda of all evil. Then I shall face the final judgment of the Valar." For a second there was a shocked silence, and then a warrior shouted, "Fëanor! He has returned! Our old prince is back! Not only returned in body, but returned to his old spirit! Here is the one we followed so long ago under the light of the trees!" Cheers erupted. Yaraquinka slapped him on the back. "I wasn't expecting that," he said. Fëanor's lopsided grin reminded Yaraquinka of Kelekorm. I am many things, Yara, but predictable is not one of them. Our priest is back! We shall make you king again! Now if anyone will see! Fëanor held up his hand one more time. No, I don't want to be king, he laughed. I tried that once. Leave that boring job to Arafinwe and this ancient advisor. But if the Valar are forgiving, give me a humble forge and a roaring fire. Aye, Azakal cried. That I can understand. But clean-up duty ain't done yet. Ride! Fëanor nodded his head at his son. Race? Amras shook his head in disbelief. Sure, Dad. Last one to the gates of Angband is a rotten egg. Then Fëanor was leading the fray, but he was grinning. Amras, Yaraquinga, and Azakal behind him, and all the host of Eastern Beleriand. Finarfin was wary of their good luck. His sister had expertly led them through the abandoned mine adits that twisted and turned until, at last, they emerged into the sun east of Thangorodrim. They had not encountered any difficulties. Here in the open grasslands, Finarfin could only pray that his terrible disguises would be enough to throw off any contingent of orcs that still lived. Most of the thralls were in no condition to fight if any orc got too close. Yet as Finarfin's eyes adjusted to the bright light, he saw something that he was not expecting. Ah, shit! He cursed internally. Finarfin rarely cursed out loud. From only about a kilometer away came a storm cloud of dust picked up by the galloping hoofs of horses, and the king could clearly see the elven riders. When they suddenly shifted direction towards where they stood at the mountain's base, he knew they had been spotted. Quickly, he attempted to sing off the disguises, but in his panic, he struggled to remove the spell. Orcs! Came the war cry. Fëanor turned the reins on hearing the shout. Sure enough, there was a large contingent of the hideous servants of Morgoth, but something was off about them. One of the orcs was in the front, waving its arms around. The orcs seemed to phase and their appearances flickered. Fëanor thought he saw a flash of gold from the leader's head. Oh, of course. Fëanor couldn't help the smirk that formed on his face as he spurred his horse faster. It must have felt his urgency because quickly they pulled ahead from the rest of the charge. As he reached his brothers, who looked truly lame in their orcish disguises, he whirled the animal around to face the rest of his people. Stay back! These are not orcs! He yelled, his horse rearing beneath him. An earthquake punctuated the statement. These are my idiot brothers. What? They sure look like... Finally, Finarfin managed to undo the disguises, revealing himself and the others to be elves. I know they look like orcs. This is a true statement. But here is Nolofinwe, who led you for so many years, and Arafinwe still rules in our beloved Tirion. There were a few gasps, as suddenly the crowds pushed to get closer. Fëanor turned to his family members, highly anticipating all of their reactions, save one, that one being a certain redhead, when he caught a sight of a woman with braided hair. Lolwen! He shouted. If it isn't the fire spirit, his sister proclaimed. Get on you for showing up after we've already done all the work. I was here earlier. I felt Moringotta. Fëanor snapped back at her. Where were you? Helping slaves escape to freedom. Fëanor smiled. All right, I guess that is a permissible excuse. Good to see you, sister. Rock approached as Fëanor jumped off his horse to greet the others and maybe try to hide from his wife. The lengths you will go to for pretty hair. Are we sure you're not related to Laura? Fëanor hadn't even realized that his hair had returned to normal after he had been returned a second time. Do you think it is enough for Nerdanel to not recognize me? Not a chance, a very familiar voice declared. Rock, save me, Fëanor said in a whisper. But Rock did not save him. Nerdanel approached and Fëanor shut his eyes as she lightly hit him upside the head. That's for scaring me, she said. And then she grabbed his collar and pulled him into a kiss. The warriors behind them began cheering. And that's for finally coming back to me. Finally? Love, I got out of Mondos in record time. Fëanor replied in shock at the kiss. I wasn't talking about returning from Mondos. The man I thought I lost forever. I lost over 400 years ago.
Oh, Fëanor replied. Well, I won't be making that mistake again. And this time, he was the one that pulled her into a kiss. End of chapter 41. Stay tuned.